There is a voice in your head right now, isn't there? A constant stream of thoughts, analyzing, judging, predicting, remembering. A never-ending cycle, one thought leading to another, spinning like a wheel that never stops. Most people live like this their entire lives, trapped in their own minds. They are not thinking, they are being thought. The mind pulls them into its stories, into past regrets, future worries, and they believe every word it says. Have you ever noticed how much energy is lost in excessive thinking? How much of your life has been consumed by thoughts about things that never even happened? Worrying about a future that only exists in your mind? Reliving a past that no longer exists, yet it feels real, it feels important, it feels urgent? But here's the truth. Thinking is only a tool. It is not who you are. There was a man who spent years obsessing over his failures. He had built a business, put everything he had into it, and it collapsed. Every day he replayed the mistakes in his mind, what he should have done, what he could have done differently. He tortured himself with thoughts, believing that if he just thought hard enough, he could rewrite the past. But one day, as he was walking through a park, he saw a small child playing. The child wasn't thinking about yesterday, he wasn't worried about tomorrow, he was just there, laughing, running, being. And for a moment the man realized, life is not happening in my mind, it is happening here now. This is the key to breaking free from excessive thinking. Not by trying to suppress thoughts, not by fighting them, but by stepping out of them, by realizing that you are not your thoughts, you are the awareness behind them. Try this right now. Pause. Listen, not to your thoughts, but to the space between them, that moment of silence, that gap, that stillness. That is who you truly are. The mind will resist. It will tell you that thinking is necessary, that you must solve every problem, that you must control the future. But the mind is a storyteller, and you are not the story. There is great power in surrendering to the present moment, when you no longer live in your thoughts, but about them. When you no longer chase every idea that enters your mind, but instead you become the watcher, the observer. Imagine living like this, not lost in thought, but awake. Imagine walking through life with a quiet mind, a still heart, and an unshakable presence. Excessive thinking is a prison, but the door has never been locked, and the key is right here, right now. There is a voice in your head, and it speaks without asking for permission. It narrates your life, comments on everything you do, analyzes every situation, and judges every action, yours and others. It worries about tomorrow, replays yesterday, imagines scenarios that may never happen. And you listen. You believe every word. You think this voice is you. But who is the one listening? Most people never ask this question. They are so deeply identified with their thoughts that they never stop to question whether they are their thoughts or simply the one observing them. But the truth is simple. You are not your thoughts. Thoughts come and go. They appear and disappear. They change. But there is something in you that remains unchanged, constant, unmoving. That is awareness. That is who you are. Imagine sitting by a river, watching the water flow. The water moves constantly, never still, always shifting. That is the nature of thought. one idea leading to another, an endless stream. But you are not the water. You are the observer sitting on the bank, watching it pass. This is the distinction that changes everything. The moment you realize that you are the watcher and not the mind itself, you break free from its grip. But the mind resists this truth. It clings to the illusion that you are it, that its voice is your identity. It will argue, it will insist, it will say, of course I am real, of course these thoughts matter. But step back for a moment. Have you ever noticed that thoughts often contradict each other? One moment your mind says, I can do this, and the next it whispers, I'll probably fail. Which one is true? Neither. They are just thoughts. They have no power except the power you give them. Right now, pause, notice the gap between your thoughts, that quiet space before the next thought arises. That is your true self, not the noise, not the endless chatter, just the presence that remains when the mind is still. This realization is the beginning of freedom. When you no longer believe every thought, when you step back and simply observe, the mind loses its power over you. The voice keeps speaking, but now you are no longer lost in its words. You are awake. You are free. Thinking is a tool, a powerful instrument that has shaped civilizations, built empires, and solved humanity's greatest challenges. But like fire, it must be controlled or it will consume everything in its path. The mind is a brilliant servant, but a terrible master. The problem is that most people don't use their minds use them. Thoughts arise uninvited, leading them in endless loops of worry, regret, and fear. Instead of directing their thinking consciously, they are trapped in compulsive thought patterns that drain their energy and distort reality. Consider a carpenter with a hammer. The hammer is an essential tool, but what would happen if he forgot to put it down? If he walked around gripping it constantly, hammering even when there were no nails? This is how most people live, with their minds running non-stop, even when no real thinking is needed. Instead of using their thoughts to solve problems and create solutions, they become lost in them. They overanalyze, second-guess, and imagine worst-case scenarios that never come true. Overthinking is not intelligence. It is noise. It gives the illusion of control while creating stress and exhaustion. Some people believe that if they just think long enough, they will find the perfect solution to every problem. But the greatest insights, the most profound wisdom, often come in moments of stillness when thinking stops and awareness takes over. The mind can process data, but true clarity arises from a deeper place, beyond thought. A scientist struggling with a complex problem may spend weeks analyzing data, making calculations, and searching for answers. But how often do breakthroughs come, not when he is deep in thought, but when he steps away while taking a walk, resting, or even in a dream? This is because the conscious mind, when overused, becomes rigid, blocking the deeper intelligence that arises from stillness. If you cannot turn off your thinking, if your mind is always running, then you are not using thought. It is using you. Real intelligence is the ability to think when necessary and be still when thinking is not needed. The most powerful minds are not the ones that never stop thinking, but the ones that know when to stop. Thought is a tool, but silence is wisdom. Learning to put down the hammer to rest the mind is not a weakness. It is mastery. Excessive thinking is an invisible thief, stealing energy, peace, and presence. It feels productive, as if replaying the past or anticipating the future will somehow change reality. But most of the time, thinking does not solve problems, it only amplifies them. The mind creates loops, analyzing the same situation over and over, looking for answers that never come. It feeds on its own momentum, turning small concerns into overwhelming burdens. Imagine carrying a heavy backpack filled with unnecessary items, old books you no longer read, tools you never use, objects that serve no purpose. At first you don't notice the weight, but as the journey continues, it becomes exhausting. This is what excessive thinking does. Each thought adds another layer of mental weight, dragging you down, draining energy that could be used for action, creativity, or simply experiencing life as it unfolds. The mind convinces you that by thinking endlessly you are preparing, protecting yourself, gaining control, but in reality you are just carrying unnecessary weight. Worrying about the future does not prevent problems, it only prevents peace. Regretting the past does not change what happened, it only keeps you stuck in it. The energy lost in excessive thinking could be used to take action, to move forward, to be present. A person may spend hours replaying a mistake, analyzing what they could have done differently, yet in that very moment they are missing what is happening now. They are lost in a world of thought while life moves on without them. Overthinking is deceptive because it disguises itself as problem solving. But real problem solving is focused and clear. It happens in the present with purpose. Overthinking, on the other hand, is repetitive, chaotic, and fueled by fear. It creates scenarios that do not exist and makes them feel real. The body reacts as if these imagined dangers are actually happening, triggering stress, anxiety, and exhaustion. If you observe closely, you will see that most of the thoughts running through your mind are unnecessary. They do not bring clarity, they bring noise. They do not create solutions, they create confusion. The greatest energy leak in life is an untamed mind, a mind that never rests, never stops talking. Imagine how much lighter, freer, and more alive you would feel if you stopped carrying the weight of unnecessary thoughts. The mind is a powerful tool, but when it is overused, it turns against you. The past and future exist only in the mind, yet they dominate most people's lives. The past is a memory, a collection of moments that no longer exist except as thoughts. The future is an idea, a projection of what might happen, yet it is never real in the present, and yet the mind clings to both, dragging people into regret over what was and fear over what could be, keeping them trapped in a reality that is not here. A man once sat on a bench, staring into the distance, lost in thought. He was reliving an argument from years ago, replaying the words, changing what he should have said, rewriting history in his mind. His body was sitting in the present, but his mind was somewhere else, reacting to an event long gone. His heart pounded, his breath became shallow, his body reacted as if the argument was happening now. This is the power of the mind. It makes the unreal feel real. Another person walks through life consumed by the future. What if I fail? What if I lose everything? What if things don't go as planned? These thoughts create stress, tension, and fear, even though nothing has actually happened. The body does not know the difference between a real threat and an imagined one. It reacts the same way. The nervous system floods with stress hormones preparing to fight or flee from a danger that exists only in the mind. The future is not the enemy, fear of it is. Life is always happening now. It is never yesterday or tomorrow. Every moment lost in past regrets or future worries is a moment stolen from the only place where life truly exists, the present. When a child plays, they are not thinking about yesterday's mistake or tomorrow's uncertainty. They are fully engaged, alive in the moment, experiencing life as it is. This is the secret of joy, of peace, of true presence. The past cannot be changed no matter how much you think about it. The future cannot be controlled no matter how much you worry. But the present is yours. It is the only reality, the only place where you have power, the only place where life unfolds. The mind will always try to pull you away, to keep you trapped in the illusion of time. But if you can step out of its grip, if you can be here now, you will discover the freedom that has been waiting for you all along. Silence is not empty, it is full of answers. But most people never hear them because their minds are too loud. Thoughts race endlessly, filling every moment with analysis, judgment, and noise. The world teaches that thinking is the key to success, that constant mental activity is necessary for control, for progress, for survival. But the most profound wisdom, the deepest clarity, does not come from more thinking. It comes from the space between thoughts. It comes from silence. Imagine standing by a lake on a windy day. The surface is restless, rippling with waves, distorting the reflection of the sky. If you try to see your reflection in it, you cannot. The water is too disturbed. But when the wind dies down and the surface becomes still, suddenly the reflection is clear. This is what happens in the mind. When it is filled with endless thoughts, clarity is impossible. But when it becomes still, wisdom appears naturally, effortlessly. The greatest breakthroughs in history did not come from overthinking, but from stillness. Scientists, artists, and philosophers throughout time have described moments when solutions arose, not from analyzing harder, but from letting go. A composer may struggle for days to finish a piece of music, wrestling with ideas, forcing creativity, and then, in a moment of silence, while walking, resting, or simply being, the melody comes effortlessly, as if it was always there, waiting to be heard. Silence is not the absence of something, it is the presence of everything. It is the space where insight emerges, where stress dissolves, where true intelligence awakens. But silence cannot be forced. It is not something to be achieved, it is something to be allowed. Most people do not experience it because they are too identified with their thoughts. They believe every thought that arises, engaging with it, reacting to it, being pulled into its stories. But what happens when you simply watch your thoughts instead of following them? What happens when you observe the space between them? In that space, There is no fear, no worry, no regret. There is only presence. And in presence there is peace. The mind believes it must always be active, always solving, always thinking. But the deepest truths, the greatest wisdom, do not come from thinking more. They come when thinking stops, when the mind becomes still, when silence is allowed to speak. The mind is like a storm, chaotic, unpredictable, constantly shifting. Thoughts swirl in every direction, pulling attention from one idea to another, creating an endless stream of inner noise. Most people live entirely within this storm, believing every thought that arises, reacting to every emotion, caught in an unconscious cycle of mental activity. But there is another way. Instead of being lost in the storm, you can step outside of it. You can become the observer. Imagine sitting on a hill, watching the clouds move across the sky. Some clouds are dark and heavy, others light and wispy. They shift and change, appearing and disappearing. But no matter how the sky looks, you are not the clouds. You are the observer watching them pass. Thoughts are the same, they come and go, some heavy with fear, others light with joy, but none of them define you. When you realize this, you gain a power that few ever experience, the power to watch your mind without being controlled by it. Most people never stop to question their thoughts. A thought arises, I'm not good enough. What if I fail? This shouldn't be happening. And they immediately believe it. They engage with it, react to it, follow it wherever it leads. But thoughts are not facts. They are mental events, passing patterns of energy in the mind. The moment you step back and observe them instead of being consumed by them, their power begins to fade. A man once struggled with anxiety for years. His mind would flood with fearful thoughts, predicting failure, imagining worst-case scenarios. He tried to fight them, push them away, replace them with positive thoughts, but nothing worked. One day, he heard a simple idea. Don't fight your thoughts. Watch them. Instead of resisting, he began observing. He noticed how thoughts arose, how they stayed for a while, and how they eventually faded on their own. Slowly, a shift happened. The thoughts still came, but they no longer had the same grip on him. He had become the watcher, not the prisoner. The moment you realize you are not your thoughts, you become free. The storm in your mind may continue, but you are no longer lost in it. You stand outside, watching, untouched by the chaos. And in that space of pure awareness, something incredible happens. The storm loses its power. The mind quiets. And in the silence you discover who you truly are. Life is not meant to be a battle against the present moment, yet most people live as if it is. They resist what is, arguing with reality, believing that things should be different than they are. The mind creates endless stories. This shouldn't have happened. This isn't fair. I can't accept this. And in doing so, it generates suffering. But suffering is not caused by external events. It is caused by resistance to them. The moment you stop fighting reality and fully surrender to the present moment, a profound shift takes place. Surrender does not mean giving up. It does not mean becoming passive or allowing life to push you around. True surrender is the deepest form of strength. It means accepting what is fully and completely without trying to change it. In this moment, it means no longer wasting energy wishing things were different, and instead using that energy to respond with clarity and wisdom. Resistance drains you, but surrender empowers you. Imagine being caught in a powerful ocean current. If you fight against it, struggling to swim in the opposite direction, you exhaust yourself. But if you stop resisting and instead allow the current to carry you, you conserve your energy. You remain alert, aware, and ready to move when the right moment comes. This is the power of surrender. When you let go of resistance, you do not become weak. You become fluid, adaptable, and open to life's natural flow. A woman once lost her job unexpectedly. Her mind immediately filled with fear. This is terrible. What will I do? Everything is falling apart. But instead of resisting, she paused. She took a deep breath and surrendered to what had happened. From that space of acceptance, new opportunities emerged. She used her energy not to complain or panic, but to take inspired action. A few months later, she found a new path, one that was even better than before. The situation had not changed, but her response to it had, and that made all the difference. Every moment of resistance is a moment lost. The mind will always try to argue with life, insisting that things should be different. But the truth is, reality is as it is. The only question is, will you fight it or will you flow with it? The instant you surrender, you step out of mental struggle and into a deeper intelligence, one that has always been guiding you, waiting for you to trust it. The prison of excessive thinking is not locked. The door has always been open, but most people never step through it because they do not realize they are imprisoned at all. The mind creates the illusion of control, making you believe that constant thinking is necessary to solve problems, to avoid failure, to stay safe. But the truth is, overthinking does not protect you. It traps you. It keeps you stuck in endless loops of worry, regret, and fear, making you a prisoner of your own thoughts. Imagine a bird raised in a cage. For years it sits behind the bars, believing that the cage is its entire world. One day the door is left open, but the bird does not fly. It has spent so long believing in its confinement that it does not even consider freedom a possibility. This is how the mind operates. It convinces you that you must think your way through life, that stillness is dangerous, that silence is unproductive, but in reality, the mind's prison is an illusion, and the key to freedom has always been within you. Freedom begins with awareness. The moment you see the mind's patterns, the endless repetition of worries, the replays of past mistakes, the fearful projections of the future, you begin to wake up. You start to realize that you are not your thoughts. They may pass through your mind, but they do not define you. You are the awareness watching them, the presence that exists beyond them. And in that realization, the prison walls dissolve. A man once spent his life doubting himself, overthinking every decision, fearing every mistake. One day, exhausted by his own mind, he asked himself a question: what if I just stopped believing every thought? He began to step back to observe. He watched as thoughts appeared, tried to pull him in, and then faded away. And he saw something extraordinary. Without his constant engagement, the thoughts lost their power. He no longer felt controlled by them. The door to his mental prison had been open all along, and now he was free to walk through it. Thoughts will always come and go, but they only have power if you give it to them. The moment you realize you are already free, the habit of excessive thinking loses its grip. The door is open. You do not have to wait. You can step through it now. You are not your thoughts. You never were. The mind, with all its noise, all its endless loops of worry, regret, and fear, is not your identity. It is simply a tool that, when left unchecked, becomes a master, pulling you into illusions of control, drowning you in excessive thinking, and keeping you trapped in a reality that exists only in your head. But now you see the truth. The mind storm is not reality, it is only passing weather. The prison of thought is not real. The door has always been open. The past is gone, the future has not yet arrived, and the only moment that truly exists, the only place where life is actually happening, is now. To break free, you do not need to fight your thoughts. You do not need to control them, suppress them, or replace them. You only need to step back and observe. The moment you realize you are the watcher, not the thinker, the mind's grip weakens. In that space of awareness, something deeper awakens. Stillness, presence, freedom. You do not have to live lost in thought. You do not have to be weighed down by the past or consumed by the future. Right here, in this moment, you have the power to put the hammer down, to stop carrying unnecessary weight, to let go of resistance and to surrender to the flow of life. The greatest wisdom, the deepest clarity, the most profound peace, none of it comes from thinking more. It comes from thinking less. It comes from silence. The question is no longer, how do I stop excessive thinking? The question is, am I willing to step beyond it? The door is open. The choice is yours.